The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. The F&M Schaefer Brewing Company raises a glass of ice-cold Schaefer beer in your honor, and Lucky Strike's blowing smoke rings at you from the studios of Comfortably Zoned Radio. And once again, it's time for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. I'm your host, Peter Trunk. My co-host is Ron Rabinovitz. Ron, how you doing?
Good, Peter. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Very
I'm doing well.
Tonight. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We have a Rookie of the Year, Cody Bellinger.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Rookie of the Year today. Yep. Unanimous.
Okay.
Jackie Robinson Rookie of the Year award to Cody Bellinger.
That's great.
Was unanimous. Isn't that great?
That's great. That's great.
So that's exciting
great.
news. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I guess the other things like Cy Young and MVP and stuff
that's
like that will be coming at a later time. Yeah.
This week.
We have a guest tonight, super Dodger fan. He's been on the show before. His name is Mark Jent. And Mark, we would like to welcome you to the show once again. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Ron. I'm doing great.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? Welcome.
Good, buddy.
Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me, and thank you for having me back.
We're gonna start off. We're gonna talk about the Brooklyn Dodgers. I want to give a little background. I know that when I meet people, and we start talking about the Brooklyn Dodgers, like if I'm wearing a Dodger hat, a Brooklyn hat, or a Brooklyn jersey or something like that, guys will come up to me all over the place, whether I'm in the library, whether I'm in the food store, wherever I am, in the mall, whatever, and just start talking Brooklyn Dodgers. And one of the things that is always covered or questioned is how many Brooklyn Dodgers are still with us? How many Brooklyn Dodgers still survive? And, of course, even the most ardent of Brooklyn Dodger fans know people like Erskine, Carl Erskine, and Don Newcomb, and Sandy Koufax, and Tommy Lasorda, and Roger Craig, et cetera. But not many of them know, and if you mention his name, they'll look at you a little strange, Joe Landrum, Landrum. Joe Landrum. He was a pitcher for the 1952 Brooklyn Dodgers, and he won a game. In fact, it was a complete game against the Pirates at Ebbets Field on July 31st of 52. The Dodgers defeated the Pirates 4-1, and Landrum went all 9 innings, striking out home run king Ralph Kiner in the process in front of a big crowd at Ebbets Field. And that was in 1952 when the Dodgers won the pennant. They went into the World Series against the Yankees. They were actually up 3-2 with the final 2 games to be played at Ebbets Field. And sadly, they dropped both of them. But 52 was a hell of a team. 53 was rated the best Dodger team ever. And, of course, in 55, they won it all. But we have a guest tonight, Mark Jent, who actually sought out and tracked down Joe Landrum, and I want him to tell us and our listeners exactly how that came about. Mark, this is a fascinating story. How did this come about?
Thank you. Well, I am on this quest to meet as many of the living, right now 23 Brooklyn Dodgers as possible. And last time I was on your show back in September, I had just met Mr. Chris Hoey outside of up in Northern California. So back in, it was right at about a month ago now. My family and I were going on fall break vacation with my in-laws, and we were supposed to be going to Gulf Shores, Alabama on our fall break vacation, but instead there was a hurricane coming to the area, and before we ever got there, we got told not to come, and our plans were being canceled. So we looked for another place where we could just go to the beach with our family and our kids. and we ended up going to Hilton Head, South Carolina. So I really have kind of a bizarre twist of events that led me to Joe Landrum. We weren't even supposed to be in South Carolina. We were supposed to be in Alabama. And so we go to South Carolina, and I know that before we leave Nashville, and again, we didn't have much notice before we had to change our plans, that there are two guys who are former Brooklyn Dodgers who live in the state of South Carolina. So we got in the car, we drove to Hilton Head, South Carolina, but I just shared with my wife, hey, there are two guys here. I would love to try to track them down this week if at all possible. And so at the beginning of the week, I started my quest to track down Mr. Joe Landrum in Columbia, South Carolina. He was about 170 miles from where we were in Hilton Head. And it took just a couple of days, and I tracked him down and found him through his son, Bill, which is another fascinating part of the story, because not only did Joe Landrum play in the big leagues, but his son, Bill, played parts of 8 seasons in the big leagues. Yes, so when I found Joe, not only did I find the father, but I found a son who played quite a bit in the big leagues in the late 80s, early 90s. So that's how I found Joe Landrum, and went and called his son, visited with him back and forth on the phone that week, and we arranged a time for me to come visit with him towards the end of that week on a Friday, and had a absolute fabulous couple hours with him on their property there in Columbia.
That's great.
Okay.
That's great.
That is wonderful.
So they were both present when you got there, the son and the father.
They were both there. Yeah. So,
wow, great.
Mr. Bill, the son, arranged it, and he had just come back from vacation the day before, and he had arranged for us to stop by and see his dad, and so he sat in with us, and he really, really enjoyed it. Bill even said, Mark, I don't get to hear these stories unless people like you come around and ask them. He goes, I hear something new every time. And he goes, Dad just didn't talk about it much. And so it was really, it was great. It was great talking to Bill as well. I mean, Bill played for the Reds, the Cubs, the Pirates, and Expos over the course of 8 years. And he had a lot of good stories too, but it was like some of my other just encounters and adventures I've had with meeting some of the other guys, that to be able to sit there for a couple of hours and just to be able to ask questions and to just soak in the moment of somebody who's living history, who I just have so much admiration and respect for.
Mm-hmm. I saw one of the photographs from your meeting, and there was a box frame of under glass of the Dodger uniform and the Dodger cap, and maybe even the glove, I forget, of Mr. Landrum. He has that in his living room, I would think.
That's in his living room, right as you come in the back door, and his wife had that done for him several years ago before she passed away. That was his playing jersey and his hat from '52 and his glove, and he had a World Series bat that had his name on it, that he was on the '52 World Series team. And then it had what I believe was the bat that had all the engraved signatures on it from, I think that's what they got for winning the pennant for going to the World Series.
Okay.
But I don't know the whole complete story, but that was out of their possession for several years. It ended up, and somehow family members and friends ended up in a storage warehouse somewhere in Missouri, and they ended up tracking it down several years ago through family, and found it and got it all sent back to him. And his wife put that in a shadow box frame for him. So,
how old is he?
So he is 89, I believe.
He'll be 90 this year. He's born. Mm-hmm. He'll be 90 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Did he only play for the Dodgers the 1 year?
So he played for the Dodgers in 50 and 52. His story, he had a great 52? Story. Yeah, so he played 16 games over the course of 2 years, but it was not 50 through 52. It was just 1950 and 52. And I'll get to that part of the story in a minute. Okay. He has a fascinating story. The guy got cut from his high school baseball team and did not even play high school ball, but like so many people did back then, he played American Legion ball. Okay. And he played American Legion ball, then he went to Clemson to play college ball, had a really successful career at Clemson. He's actually in the Clemson Sports Hall of Fame. and he was on the Clemson team in 1947. That was the team that played in the very first College World Series. If you look up College World Series, you'll see that Clemson played Yale. And he says, "Oh, it's very different back then from where it is now." But you could tell he was really proud of that moment because he kept referencing it. I mean, he was a starting pitcher on that Clemson team, and as many people know, the first baseman on that Yale team was George H.W. Bush.
Right.
And that was something where he was able to, years later, when he was President Bush, he came through South Carolina for a rally or a speech, and they tried to connect the two of them, the people who were in town, and weren't able to connect them, but President Bush wrote him a note, and that was something that he really valued and treasured, was just having that communication with President Bush. But so he was on that 47 World Series team, and after the season was over that summer, he got signed by the Dodgers for $3,000. And one of the parts of the story that I love is before the guy ever goes to play minor league ball, he gets asked by the Dodgers. He said, "Hey, we want you to come through a BP to the big league team on our upcoming road trip to Philly and Chicago and St. Louis." So here's Joe Landrum, straight out of college, has just been signed, and he's with the 47 Dodgers just a couple of months after Jackie made his major league debut, and he's on this road trip with them throwing batting practice, and just soaking in that moment. And shortly after that batting practice session, those few weeks he played with the team. I mean, he stayed with the team to throw batting practice. Then he went home, and I believe he started his minor league career then in '48.
In Montreal, I suppose, right?
I believe it was Double-A.
Oh, Double-A.
I have to look and see, but I believe he played a little bit in Thomasville in '47, and then he played for a couple of different teams in '48, Greenville and Asheville, and then in '49 he played for Fort Worth. So he played minor league ball in '48 and '49, and then was with Montreal in 1950 before getting called up. And he made his major league debut, I believe it was July of 1950 at St. Louis Sportsman's Park, and that was really special to Mr. Landrum because that was his favorite team as a kid. So he finds himself on the mound.
He's a Cardinal fan.
He's a Cardinal fan. So if you think about where Major League Baseball was placed back then, I mean, demographically, St. Louis might have been, it was one of the closer teams to him there in Columbia, South Carolina. But he talked about coming in relief in July of 1950 at a game against the Cardinals. Bases are loaded. They call him in relief, and the guy hits a sharp ground ball to Peter Reese, and it's a 6-4-3 double play, Reese to Robinson to Gil Hodges, and that was his welcome to the big league moment.
There you go. Double play. That's perfect.
As Peter Reese ran across the field and patted him on the backside and said, "Hey, there ain't much to this, boy." And so that was
That's funny.
And he said
That's funny. What did he do in 1951, Mark? What did he do? What did Joe do in 1951?
1951, he decided he wanted to go back and finish his college degree. So when he left Clemson, he still had a year left of his college degree. So he went back in 1951 and he finished his degree at Clemson because that meant a lot to him and that meant a lot to his mother at the time. So then when he came back in 1950, he was with Montreal for a little bit before he got called up to the big league team. And the 52 season was, you could tell that was just a shining moment for his career because he was with the team when they went to the World Series against the Yankees. He actually had a picture in one of his rooms off to there in his house of him with some of the press. I think it was him and Preacher Row with some of the press there in 1952, being interviewed at Yankee Stadium before the World Series. So he kind of ironic there. He played in 50 and 52, was not with the team in 51.
Right.
Now, did he pitch in the World Series that year?
He did not pitch in the World Series.
Okay.
He did not pitch in the World Series, but he was on the roster. From all indications that I could tell, he was on the roster for the World Series. And then he went home in the off season of 52, and that's when he got his notice to go into the Army. He got his draft notice. And that's his career didn't end there. He was in the Army in 53 and 54. one of the most interesting parts of his story is he came back in '55, and at that time, you guys probably know this better than me, but I believe there was a clause that if you got drafted into the Army, you had a guaranteed spot on the club that you were on when you got drafted. So he was on the big league club. So he had a guaranteed spot on the '55 Brooklyn Dodgers. But he gets to spring training, and he asked to be assigned to AA Fort Worth because, as he put it, he could save more money playing AA ball than he could living in New York. So he asked to play for the Fort Worth, and of course, I mean, he had no clue, and that would be the year they go on to win the World Series. And after the '55 season, he hung it up and decided that was enough, and he went back home to Columbia, South Carolina.
Huh. How
Holy
interesting. Cow. Isn't that something? That's great.
Very interesting. That is interesting. Joe Landrum. He wore number 19 before Junior Gilliam. Jim Gilliam came up in 1953, and he was given number 19. He won Rookie of the Year that year in 1953. But the Dodger who wore number 19 immediately before Gilliam was Joe Landrum. Gilliam wore number 19 for 100 years because when he died as a Dodger coach, they retired his number. Jim Gilliam is the only Dodger that had his number retired that is not in Baseball Hall of Fame. So I'm sure when you told Joe Landrum that his uniform number has been retired, he must have been shocked unless he knew about it.
I did, and I don't think anybody had told him that before, so I was glad to relay that news on to him. Did you know the Dodgers retired your number? And he got a big kick out of that. He was such a gentleman. He was just such a gentleman and so down to earth and so willing to just share the stories. I let him know that I had spent some time earlier this year with Carl Erskine, and he just raved and raved about what a gentleman Carl Erskine was back then, which doesn't surprise any of us now who've met him and who knows him. And now that you could tell he had a lot of admiration for him.
Right. Does he still follow baseball, Mark? Do you know?
A little bit, but I wouldn't say a lot. But you could tell he still followed a little bit, and it was real interesting sitting there with his son Bill, who played. I mean, this guy, he played with Hall of Famers. I mean, if you look at the two of them, they have an interesting story in between them. So he goes to back in the early mid '90s. Joe Landrum goes to town and picks up a USA Today, comes home, reads his USA Today like he would every day. And he sees on the front page of the sports section or in the baseball section that the Bourbon, I think his name is Peter Bourbon.
Pedro.
Pedro Bourbon. And his father had just broken Bill and Joe Landrum's father-son duo for saves. Well, Joe and Bill did not know they had the record for father-son saves until he read it in the USA Today that day. And the reason being is I believe Bill Landrum had 58 career saves, and Joe, when he quit playing, he didn't have any. Well, saves weren't a thing in the 50s. Well, then years later, he gets credited with a save to make it the 59th save. So he had one save. So for a few decades, they had to fight, not for a few decades, really just for a short period of time, because Bill's career had just ended. They had the father-son major league record for saves, but they didn't know they had it. They were like, he was like, Dad, we didn't even get to celebrate this until it was broken.
That's great.
Unbelievable. That's so great.
That is
cool.
I love it.
Mark, how many of the Dodgers have you seen, and how many have you not seen that you're tracking?
So out of the 23 that are still living, I've met 5. I have. That is Tommy Lasorda, Don Newcomb, Carl Erskine, Chris Hoey, now Joe Landrum. And I've talked to a couple others on the phone. I have not met them in person yet. Bob Borkowski and Ed Roebuck I've talked to on the phone. And so there's 18 that I haven't met. I guess you could say 16 that I haven't talked to.
Do you have a formal plan to meet one or more of them in the future? near future?
Not a formal plan. I've got my eye on which ones are within a geographic region where I might be able to knock out a couple, a few at a time.
Okay. Right.
And there's a few road trips. Nothing formal in stone. Jim Denny and my friend Patrick Cameron and I have some plans of maybe going to visit one or two here over the winter if we can get our weekends lined up. And
wonderful.
So it's one of those, and I share this quest with each one of the guys that I meet, and every one of them have the same response as Joe Landrum did. His thing he told me, he says, "Hey, you better hurry." And
you gotta hurry, right?
And just such a gentleman, and they all find it interesting. And I have each one of them sign. I have an 8x10 at Ebbets Field that I get each one of them to sign and write the years that they played at Ebbets Field on it. And it's just kind of a fun memento.
You know who might be in your territory would be Ransom Jackson.
Ransom Jackson is in our territory in Athens, Georgia, and
he's in Georgia,
Marv Rackley is actually in Westminster, South Carolina. I believe Mr. Rackley is 95 or 96 years old now. From what I understand, he made his major league debut also on April 15th, 1947, the same day as Jeffy. The two of them are in close proximity together, and then there's a
you better hurry to get him.
Yeah. I believe he's the oldest living Brooklyn Dodger. Right
oldest
now.
One, yeah.
I believe so.
Huh. Yeah.
So I've got the list, and I look at it and think, okay, when can I possibly go meet a couple? And it's fun. It's fun to meet them. It's fun to hear the history. It's fun to hear the stories.
Oh, I'm sure.
And hopefully it's honoring to them.
We had Ransom Jackson on our show. He was great. Wasn't he, Pete? He was terrific.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Fantastic to have Ransom on the show. It was great. Yeah. It's a great thing that you're doing. I think 23 Dodgers are still with us, and you've met 5 of them, and you have 18 to go, and you have a plan. Although not formal, you have a basic general plan, and you can maybe meet 2 or 3 of them in one swing because they might live close together, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it not only for you personally, but for all of us when we hear the story. And I would suggest that you take many, many pictures and keep notes about this, because in the future you just might want to write a book about this.
Yeah,
and I'm not talking about a book that's going to make you $5 million and put you on television or anything. I'm talking about just a simple old book for guys like us, Brooklyn Dodger fans, that would eat it up alive, and would be an important addition to Brooklyn Dodger history.
Right.
And the thing that tickles me is that Ron Rabinovitz is 72. I'm 71. And Mark, how old are you?
I just turned 40.
Well, see, that's what makes it even more remarkable to me, that a 40-year-old baseball fan, that a 40-year-old baseball fan has the wherewithal and the interest and to do a thing like this. I think it's wonderful. I really do. I think it's great.
I commend you. I really do.
I also commend you. And you know something? I would like to keep, if I may, I know it's a very short show, but I would like to keep this 100% Brooklyn tonight. And if you don't have any more to add with Joe Landrum or any other Brooklyn stories you might have through him or from Hoey, Chris Hoey, maybe we should call it a night and just keep this a Brooklyn show. I've been getting flack feedback, of course, not from our Comfortably Zone Radio nor from our producer, but from fans on Facebook saying that there's too much Los Angeles stuff on your show and you don't pay homage to the Brooklyn Dodgers enough. I try to split it up, and Ron is my witness. I try to split it up 50-50. Well, thank you. I think I do a good job, but you want to know something? There have been especially this year with the Dodgers run, the LA Dodgers run, there have been quite a few shows, 3 or 4 of them, that were 90% Los Angeles. So I would like to keep this all Brooklyn.
They had to be.
Yeah, well, I would like to keep this one here all Brooklyn. And because next week I already have it planned, we're going to talk about Zach Wheat and the 1930s Dodgers, Brooklyn Dodgers, with Bill Hall. And I hope neither one of you are bitterly disappointed. But I would like to wrap it up and thank our guest Mark Jent for all that he has done, not only tonight, but on other shows. And thank you for future shows, because we're definitely going to invite you back.
Hey, Peter.
And yes,
excuse me. I just wanted to add something. Mark came to Pasadena to meet me after the Game 1 of the World Series. I had never met Mark. He and his friend drove over to where I was staying, where the Astros were staying.
Okay.
And we had a wonderful, wonderful visit. And then we went into the bar to have a drink. And then we saw history. The Astros were in the bar, okay? And 3 Brooklyn Dodger fans who were drunk out of their mind, who didn't belong in that hotel, came in. And as you walk in the bar from the lobby, there's another door going out into the patio or balcony outside.
Mm-hmm.
And Hinch and a bunch of the Astros were out there, right, Mark?
Correct.
And this guy one of the drunks got into his face, and they had a fist fight with the Astro players. Next thing we know, there's security guards coming from all over the place. And the next thing we know is that the police are there. They're hauling these 3 bums out. It was the most obscene thing. Right, Mark?
Correct.
Yeah.
And all at the same time, I was just waiting on the chaos to calm down so I could continue to hear stories from Ron. Because I was just glad to be sitting there with my buddy Patrick and hearing stories from Ron. So that was a highlight of my trip, to not only go to that particular game, but to be able to spend some time with Ron afterwards.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure being with you and your friend. It was terrific. And my son was upstairs. He was packing because he was leaving early in the morning to fly back to Minneapolis. I was staying another day. So he gets home, and about a week later, he sends me this clipping that was in the newspaper about this brawl at this hotel. So he says, "How come you never told me about it?" I says, "I was there. I was a witness to history."
I saw that.
We were so busy to get you into the airport and everything, I forgot to tell you about it.
That's quite a story. And you know what?
Crazy story.
When you listen to this show on Comfortably Zoned Radio and you hear yourself, Ronnie, you're going to hear that you said there were 3 drunk Brooklyn Dodger fans and the police had to come to throw the bums out. You didn't even realize you said bums.
Did I? Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I didn't say they were Brooklyn Dodger fans. I just said they were Dodger fans.
Exactly.
They were bums.
They threw the bums out. That was perfect.
They threw the bums out. That's right.
That was absolutely perfect.
I mean, one of them actually, he stripped his clothes off. I mean, they were so drunk. He crapped all over the balcony. I mean, it was terrible. It was disgusting. They had to close the balcony, right, Mark?
Correct.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was disgusting.
Oh, man. That's
yeah,
bad.
it was bad.
That's bad.
And these Astro guys were really nice. They were really nice guys.
We end on that note of 3 bums getting thrown out of a bar. Ronnie Rabinovitz, my partner, I thank you very much, as always. And to our guest, Mark Jent, thank you very much. Come back
Mark,
soon.
thank you.
And we bid you a fond good night. Thank you very much. Good night,
gentlemen.
Thank
you both. I appreciate it.
Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.